Hello everybody, on to the next step, which is this. I think it's time to drop the motor in there. Kind of worked, I've got most everything worked out that I need to do. Now it's time to get the motor in there, finalize some of that stuff. You know, like I can't really figure out the rest of the fuel system until I know where it's going to exit. So I can pull the motor back out again. I'll just set it in there so I can get that stuff mocked up and finished. Just a few more things I'm going to do before I get the motor in. Cleaning everything up for one. I'm going to redo that gold on both sides. Put some new gold on there. Some more cleanup. Like I said, I got to run some wire for my gear selector. This transmission has a center on it for what gear the tranny is in. That's one of the pieces of the puzzle, is where I'm going to mount that thing. I took that thing apart, thinking about facing it up somewhere, you know, like in this plate right here, but there's really no room. Or within the gauge cluster, but there's really no room. And I could put it up here. You know, in this piece, which goes up in here. Kind of like what I did with the boost. That over there above the mirror is the boost gauge. And it looks kind of stupid. I don't like the white, so I'm probably going to cover that up and try and do something cool with that and mount it in the little make it a little more discreet, or a little more built-in looking, besides just paste it on there. Anyways, I didn't want that I didn't want this big old ugly round gauge up there necessarily either. And there's no room inside of here around the roll cage to fit that in there, as small as it is when I unpackage it. So I was sitting here kind of stalled out trying to figure that out. Now I did get a good idea. I think what I'm going to do is mount it inside the dash here. And I don't know if I'll use this casing and sink it down in there. But I think I'm going to mount it right there, and I may just cut out that rectangle and put it on the back side of that thing and just flush mount that piece of tinted plastic. Flush mounted, I think. In that panel. Now what that'll do, I'll mount that thing upside down, so when you get in here, what you will get is a reflection. See how the dash reflects off the window up here? You can pretty much see everything up on the window. So when that thing's turned on, I'll get a heads-up display of that number, and I think I'm going to put it over there just because of the angle of the glass. If I stick it over here, it just makes it turn one way or the other. to where if I get it over here, it kind of faces it up square, so the number won't look oblique. And it'll be down kind of low, and it'll be right there in my face where I can kind of see it. Anyway, I think that's a good idea. I think that's what I'm going to do. So now that I have a location, don't necessarily need to build that right now, but I'm going to run those wires. I got to tear my loom apart again and snake that from the back all the way up to the front. And then I will also include a wire for the reverse. If you include a reverse wire, there's a spot to plug that into the loom. So I'll get an R indicator. So I'll get numbers 1 through 5 and then the letter R for reverse. So anyway, that's what's going to happen there. I got to go back and relearn all my electrical. It's been so damn long. I got switches and buttons under here that do stuff I don't quite even remember. I remember most of them, but one of them turns the fans on. One's a fuel pump, kind of bypasses all the switches. And then I got a secret key hidden in here. So if the electronics go bad, I can turn the key on, power the car up. And when I built that thing, I was short a couple of the accessories turning on, so I had to make another switch, which I can turn on some of the accessories in the car with my secret little key switch. So yeah, fuel pump, accessories. One of them runs the radiator, the fan on the radiator. And then the other one runs my fans back here to cool the car. I like to pull into a parking lot, turn the car off, flip that switch, and then the fans run, 5-10 minutes, and it cools off the rear area very well. Then you just reach in there and flip that switch off. Anyway. Next thing we do is get busy, run them wires, and clean up and finish up and drop the motor in. Had to back up a little bit. I never did weld the inside. On that joint right there. And I didn't paint underneath these bars and stuff very good, so I had to prep everything out, weld that up, repaint everything. So now I think I'm ready to clean everything up, start getting the motor in there. Another thing I figured out is it's not going to work to do that heads up thing because the numbers are backwards. So I have to integrate this thing in here somewhere. And I think I'm just going to sneak it right up in here. Kind of put the dash pod back up there just to kind of look and see. And I think that's going to fit behind there. So I'll just have that number kind of showing through this tinted plastic. I'll take that out of this housing. And then I'll mount it into here. I hope. Yeah, we'll see. At the moment, that's kind of the only spot. Getting ready to do the last oil injection. Got the motor mounts on there, get the alternator on there in a moment. I'm gonna get that hole plugged up. And got this all cleaned up. Cleaned up in here. Got the new gold on there. I'm gonna go ahead and put the motor in and see where we're at. It's gonna unlock a ton of stuff to do. Motor's going in already, I think. Drop it right down in that hole. And then the fun begins. Open up a can of worms, there's stuff to do once that's in there. It's in. Sitting in the hole. Next thing I gotta do is bolt the flywheel and the clutch onto the end of the crank. And that's a shim which may or may not go behind the throwout bearing. I gotta measure it, make sure I got proper clearance in between the pressure plate and the throwout bearing, which means I gotta install the transmission, use some clay or something to make sure I got the proper gap, and then take it back apart and check the gap, and if it's all good, then put it back together again. And once I get that mounted up to the motor, that is when I will begin to here we go. I gotta make a bracket to mount the end of this transmission, and this thing will go back here somewhere. Probably. Let's take a look. See where this thing goes. Where does it go? Oh. Right there. Bingo. So I will make and weld some tabs onto this plate that they cut for me, which is awesome. So now I don't have to. And I could have never laser cut it like that. And suspend the back of this transaxle, rubber mounted, which will hook onto the original. I don't even know where in the hell it is. But I got a bar that goes back there. Bolts on. And we'll suspend the back of that thing. Anyways, a lot of work ahead, just getting that part done. And then I can start hooking everything up. Alright. Got the flywheel bolted on. And I got the balancer torqued down. 235 foot-pounds. That's a lot of torque. Right down there. So that's bolted on. You can't torque that down when it's on the engine stand. So next I'm going to put the clutch in there. It's a Kennedy dual clutch. Made in the USA. Should handle the power. Get that bolted up. Alright, getting ready to put the transaxle in there, and I got some clay on the throwout bearing. So I'm going to put that up in there and let that squish. And then I'll pull that apart and measure how much clay I got left. It's going to squish up against the pressure plate. Those tongs right there. So I got to wrestle this thing up through here. Right up in this way. Two steps forward, one step back. I was going to put the transaxle in there, and I had that adapter plate bolted on there. And I was thinking, shoot, that's not going to fit through that hole. So I thought, well, I better take that off, and I'll just mount it to the motor. And then I'll weasel that up in there. So I took the plate off, go to put it on the block, and I realized that it won't go over the clutch and the flywheel. And I realized at that moment I had to put that on first. So yeah, pulled the clutch back off, flywheel back off, put the plate on there, and then retorqued everything. And now, ready for that. So, getting it wrangled in there. This is what it looks like going in. Use a couple different jacks. I got a pad down there so I don't scratch up that frame. Anyway, it's almost there. A little bit more. Wrangling around. We'll bolt her up. Alright guys, there we are in the proper position. It looks sick or what? It's very big, very large transaxle, way bigger than the SDR5, I think they call it. So the sequential is a lot bigger. So where I'm at now, this cage that fits in the back of this car, basically attaches here, and then right up here. That thing sits like this, up in there. And this part, actually it's this way. This part here is the receiver I made for the tow hitch. So that goes right there. And then, where are they? These things. Hooked on here and went down like that. And then the transmission would mount right on top of this piece, right up in here from that bracket that I gotta finish making. But I had to cut these off because it's too narrow. So the distance from here to here is too wide, and the other transmission fit in between them. And they kind of hit right here and right here, so this has to be, they have to be brought out wider. So these pieces will have to be remade to come from there up to the top, up to this piece. And this bar right here, which really has no purpose as far as I can tell, besides another spot for this to rest on, but this gets in the way also. It just barely hits right here. So next thing I'm going to be doing is cutting out this bar. And then I'll be able to get this piece back up in there. And then I'll start making the parts I need to tie that all together. And then once I get this cage built and bolted up in there, then I can finish with the bracket from the transmission onto this cage. And I'll have to order a couple of hockey puck type rubber bushings to go in between the transmission mount and this cage. The motor really doesn't give much. Those mounts are pretty solid down there. You see them? Yeah, way down there. So the motor hardly moves at all. But still, it's all got to be isolated. It's not going to be directly mounted to the frame. Starting to look pretty cool. Yeah, one more thing I forgot. The clearance between the clutch and the throwout bearing. So I measured it. I put some of that clay in there. There's an impression of the tongs. And this was the clutch, or the throwout bearing. Anyways, when I slice that off, it's just a little bit less than 1/4 inch. And I'm going to get a hold of the guys that built the throwout bearing, the slave cylinder, and we'll get with them. I may have to get a different sleeve that goes in there because they want that gap a little tighter. So I'll be talking with them, and I may be changing that out. Alright guys, going for it. Pulled that thing apart again. Put some straight edge. Crossed the pressure plate here. And measured, from this surface into the tongs. And then from this surface to here. And then from this into the throwout bearing, and then did some math, come out to 1/8 of an inch, which is exactly what Kennedy recommends. 1/8 inch clearance, so I'm gonna go for it. And I did that clay it appears to be 3/16 of an inch, so I got in between 1/8 and 3/16, so I'm good to go. I measured this 2 different times and did the math 2 different times, and it came out to 1/8 inch exactly. So I'm going to put that back together and continue on with the mounts. here's what I'm working on next. This is the part I cut off of this cage on both sides, and then I put a split down here and then move this location over that way. It used to be like right here. And I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how to mount this thing up. So here's the plate that's going to bolt to the trans. Here's my isolator. So I'm probably going to cut this original support off, move that in closer. Because when I split that and moved it over, it's kind of at a bad angle. It makes that sit at a bad angle. You can see right in there how that's just kind of tilted, not level. So that thing's got to be cut off and repositioned anyway. Everything's got to stay low because the exhaust comes right through here. Anyway, I'm going to cut that off, reposition it, somehow tie it into this piece so it all sits in there level. And of course we want it to look good. This is where I do a lot of sitting around and getting nothing done, trying to figure this crap out. Okay, I think I came up with a design. And look at, here's the difference between just trying to eyeball it and freehand it compared to holding a straight edge. So that was kind of just a practice to see where I'm at, and then this one was for real. And then here it is, cleaned up and bent. Yeah, so that came out of this. Right there. And then that'll go right here. And it'll be something, we'll keep it parallel with this and this. So when this bolts up to the transmission, and then that rubber puck will sit right here. And they'll have an identical symmetrical. This right here is not symmetrical. But these mounts will be. Here's my center line, and I'll just go off the center line, mimic what I did here over there, and keeping this parallel. Anyways, we're real happy with that. So nice. Whipping that out. Doesn't take much to clean that up, that edge with a grinder. I'll probably fill in that little spot right there. I don't want that to be a weak point where I could start bending. That should be pretty strong. You know, when this thing's standing up, all the force is going to be up and down. You know, nothing side to side. So this will support that up and down part, and then given that it's off, you know, this stands out over here, so you want a little bit of side to side support, and that's why I got this piece coming down, and I'll weld that on there. And that'll be enough support, I believe. Take care of that, and then all said and done, I'll follow this line up here. And then make a nice round bend, and then come down, and all this part will be gone. It'll be a nice little simple bracket. Got everything laid out on this piece of paper. Center lines, parallel lines. This thing laid out where it belongs. And then I kind of drew this side, the same guidelines as this side. And I kind of come up with this picture right there. Transfer that to this. I've got some lines scribed in there. So now we'll get the plasma cutter out, and I'll see what happens. I'll cut that out of there and see if we come up with something similar to that side. Alright, let's see if we can do this on camera. This is how I do it. You just kind of hold this straight edge. I don't know, it's about a ½ inch. Just basically hold it equal distance from the head. Like that. I should have my dark glasses on. Raise that side. It's hot. Yep. Get back. Go on. Get. Get out of here. Go on. Get. Alright. There we go. And hopefully I didn't screw it up. And there we go. And then I'll fold that piece up. See how it works. This will fold up. So we'll get that cleaned up and we'll see how it did. Okay, there we go. Pretty good. Screwed up right here just a little bit. But I can add some material on there if I want to be that picky, which I probably will. Yeah, so I will get this tacked on there, clean up that edge and that edge now that I got that bent. And tack that on there. And I'll line out where I want to cut this thing. And I will have a bracket. Okay, there's what I got. There's that bracket sitting in its place, untrimmed. And I got these brackets cut off of this piece. And I got to put a new one on there that matches up with this on each side. And that's kind of what I'm doing with this piece of paper. Can't get a good view, but that's what I'm doing with that piece of paper there. And I'll match that up and then transfer that to a piece of metal and get that in place on each side. There it is out of the car. And here's the piece that goes on there, like that. So yeah, now I gotta weld this up, clean it up, and hopefully that will be good enough. There we go, all painted up. Done. So now put that back in the car. See if it holds my transmission. It is in. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Should work. I think I got everything thought about that needs to be thunk about. I don't have the proper bolts in here. I had to get the right size. But those are just holding it up right now. And that cradle's bolted in there. That cradle's a pretty important piece. It kind of holds up the whole back end, which gets secured with some rivets right here. And it's supported by that little upright piece back here. And then the wing mounts to that. So I spent a lot of time getting the wing adjusted. It bolts right up to that top piece. So it's pretty important that that top piece did not change, being it holds the body and the wing. Yeah, glad to be done with that. There was a lot of thinking, a lot of things that could go wrong. Oh, by the way, it's clearanced properly for the shifting cable. Will go right through there, and it'll have enough room. And I had to put a hole in that one for the cable to go through there. Should be good. Should be good. Now the next thing I got to do is mount the shifter. So I'll kind of have to pull the interior apart again. And this thing needs to be mounted in there. And then after I mount this, I can get my cables up and down, grabbing gears. So yeah, that'll be the next piece of the puzzle. Shifter and shifting cables, and then that shall be done.